All right, you are live.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday, January 12th, 2023 regular meeting of the Financial Advisory Commission. We have with us me, Bob Burton, Vice Chair, Terry Hepworth, Jim Cardillo, Frank Brown, and Patrick Bannon, all commission members, and all commission members are present. We also have here virtually Alderman Ross Arnett, Alderman Ellie Tierney, and well, we have Finance Director Jody Dickinson and Tricia Hopkins, person from Personnel. Tricia, are you Personnel Director or what's your title?
Actually, I'm a Human Resources Manager for the city.
Okay, I was close.
You were close.
Human Resources Manager. And did I forget anybody? Madeline Horo from City of Annapolis TV. Good morning, Madeline. And I see Kerry Berger has just joined us. Good morning, Kerry, from the Office of Law. And I don't remember if I mentioned Ed Behan as a commission member present, but Ed is here. And Kim Moronsky from Finance Department is here. So I think that's the group for now. We expect Mike Malinoff to be joining us shortly. And if we get to his issues on the agenda and he's not here yet, we'll just work around. So I sent that agenda last Friday or so. Everybody have an opportunity to review the agenda? Any revisions or corrections? Jim Cardillo.
Good morning. On section 6, new business,
Yes.
can we add a brief discussion with regards to the fact designee to the audit committee?
Okay.
Don't need resolution today, but I just want to keep it on the agenda.
Why don't can we cover that under 4C audit committee?
That's fine. I will do
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Motion made by Bob Burton, seconded by Jim Cardillo.
Thank
Any
you.
discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand or signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved unanimously. You have minutes from our last meeting, December 8th, 2022, that I sent out along with the agenda. Any revisions or corrections to the proposed minutes, draft minutes? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the December 8th, 2022 minutes as presented. Bob Burton made the motion, seconded by, Frank Brown. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye or raise your right hand. Opposed? Carries unanimously. The minutes of December 8th are approved. Let's go down to Roman 4, Finance Department. Jody, there you are. What do you got from the Finance Department? How can I miss you, Jody?
No, I know. How could you miss me?
Go ahead. What do you have for Finance Department? I would just note for the record that Mike Malinoff has just joined us. Go ahead, Jody.
Okay, so you just want my general report too.
Yeah.
So in December, I think we were talking about the bond sale. I think we had just had at the last meeting. So that settled on the 21st of December and everything went well there. That's the day when all the final papers are signed and the money changes hands. So we're all settled there. We are starting up our budget planning process for the FY24 budget, and the departments are beginning to report in on their budget requests, which were initially due yesterday, but I'm sure that they're still funneling in now. So Katie's very busy trying to organize that information and make sure it's in the system correctly. We have had some success on the staffing issue. We have 5 vacancies and I'm sending out offer letters on 3 of them today. Still no procurement officer candidates per se, and then the other one, we have a billing clerk that they haven't done other interviews for yet. So hopefully we'll get people in place over the next few weeks and start to become fully staffed and functioning again. So we're kind of behind on a lot of things. The annual financial report, Julie Donnelly, the Assistant Finance Director, is taking the lead on that and working with the auditors. We're hoping to have that out by the end of this month. We've gotten our deadline extended to January 31st. The numbers are pulled together. The auditors are doing a few last steps, and we still have to finalize the book. So there's a chance that we'll get that out by the end of the month. So.
Good. Anything else, or that's your general report?
That's it, unless anybody has specific questions.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Jody on her report? Hearing none, thank you, Jody. Good morning, Mr. City Manager. How are you this morning?
Well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. You're up.
And you want me to give a general report, or did I have a specific thing you wanted me to address?
Well, any general report, but then you also said you wanted to brief the fact on the leadership and council retreat.
Right. Well, that was what I was going to talk a little bit about.
Okay.
A couple of the council members were there. We had a council retreat on Saturday at the Maryland Municipal League offices. It was facilitated by Julia Novak of the Raptelis Group. And all the council and mayor were there, fully engaged, came up with a strategic plan going forward. We're going to be meeting with the directors at a date not yet specified. Tricia and I need to get together on some final details from the director leadership team retreat. And I think it was a very fulfilling and positive way to spend our Saturday, which I know everyone wants to do on a Saturday, but it was great. I enjoyed it. I always go into those things. I won't say trepidation is the right word, but I'm nervous, and it takes a lot more out of me than you may know, just to kind of mentor and hope that everyone's there. We're fully supplied, everything's lined up, and it all worked out. It couldn't work out any better. I think the facilitator was very good. She had a background in the city of Rockville and other entities, so she knew how to work with the council members well, and they were all engaged, and we came out with a lot of good ideas. And I'll let Ross and Ellie add to that if they'd like.
Yeah, Mike, was there anything of particular substance? I know that I'm sure you came out with a lot of substance, but anything of particular substance that might be of interest to the FAC?
But we came up with the council came up with a series of strategic goals. If you give me a second, I don't know whether I can share it with you, but I can certainly read them to you if you give me 1 minute. She also provided much more detail as well, but that's with the council right now. So the 7 goals that the council came up with is transportation and mobility, excellent services, environmental sustainability and resiliency, economic viability, vibrant, safe, and livable, historic, equitable, and just, and smart planning. And that all is the framework for governance going forward with the city of Annapolis. And the real key to, I think, the meeting was the term governance, and having the council focus in on that aspect of it. And as policymakers and the directors, leadership team, mayor's team, focus in on the implementation component of it. We also came out with a document that the mayor and council are in the process of reviewing. And it's loosely termed the rules of civility for operations of the council meeting. And not only does it address the council interaction, but the way that things are presented at the city council by the public, certainly with certain First Amendment limitations to which we control, but really to try to help foster a positive environment going forward. And so the 7 strategic planning goals that I listed, there are a lot of details associated with that the council got together and proposed. And we're going to be sharing those with the leadership team and take the steps next for implementation. So that's kind of it in a thumbnail. Thought it was great, been to a lot of these. And I think as Ross told me afterwards, and I agreed with them, I thought we were going to build off of what we had done in 2012-13, but the facilitator kind of led the council in their own direction, which I think was really healthier. And a couple of the councils before weren't sure what it was or didn't even really want to participate because they had a real ward-centric approach to governing, and that all went to the wayside, and I think everyone embraced it. So it's good.
Good, thanks, Mike, I appreciate that. I'm gonna call on Alderman Arnett and Alderman Tierney, see if they have any additional comments. But before I do that, anybody have any questions for Mike Malinoff? If not, Alderman Arnett, then Alderman Tierney.
I defer to Alderwoman Tierney.
Well, I was just thinking about something when Mike was talking, that Kate Connolly was there the whole day. I think her objective was to see if anything could be equated to the budget. And I just realized that there was no goal for, better budget stewardship or anything like that, which is reflective of, I think, our financial health. I think that's kudos to our finance department. I just thought of that, but the goals were, sort of abstract, and they'll funnel down into how the department heads structure their goals. What I found really interesting is being the Alderperson Award 1, which includes the historic district, that a lot of the goals for stewardship and historic values came from others. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. It isn't, I'm just not in this alone trying to protect the historic district. So it was really great to have everyone in the room, sharing their values, which were citywide instead of ward centric, as Mike said, which is good. So it was good. Definitely a different picture before versus after.
Good, thank you very much, Ellie. Ross, do you have any follow-up?
Yes. So I thought that the current strategic plan was pretty much focused on departments. There are some exceptions. And I think what the council came up with were global goals. And in fact, I'm glad we didn't have one on good financing. I think that's subsumed under providing good services. The exciting part for me is that I think we can now move forward, adopt a strategic plan, and then the audit committee gets to work melding the strategic plan and the performance measures. And then I hope, and I'm glad that Trish is here, the performance measures will be reflected in the performance appraisals, and will really have a very strongly vertically and horizontally integrated city set of goals. So I'm very pleased.
Thank you, Ross. Anybody have any questions for Ross? Or comment generally on this report? Jim Cardillo.
This is a question for either member of the council. So we have these 7 or 8 goals that were defined. What's the next step from there? Do you end up turning these goals into action items, or what's the next step?
I think that's Mike's answer.
Yes, the answer
Okay.
to that is, Jim, yes. We're
Thank you.
taking those high-level strategic governance oriented, policy-making oriented goals, and we're going to be meeting with the directors, the leadership team, and going over that and trying to turn them into action items. I will say the council did come up with more specifics associated with each of those, and those were shared with the council members as well. So, yeah, I think as Ross mentioned or articulated, it's really a process of coming up with what we think we need to do going forward, what our council goals are, the strategic plan is, and then meeting with the directors and having the directors get into the nitty-gritty detail implementation component of it. And we'll be probably doing that late winter, early spring.
Thanks, Mike. I see Alderman Arnett has his hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it seems to me there's still another step. I think we need to share this with our constituents and maybe even have a meeting where people can come and give us input after we get consensus with the leadership. I still think there's an important group that we need to get consensus from.
If I may, the report that was submitted to the council by Julia Novak really listed a series of areas within the process that kind of synthesized down to these 7. And it started off with expectations from the council, which kind of gives you a sense. It's and helpful. And 1 was strive for consensus, 2, get on the same page, 3, govern strong, 4, mutual bonds, 5, team building, move forward together, 6, recognize the need for collegiality and respect, 7, have great morale and team spirit. Morals help too. 8, more trust and communication. 9, build relationships, and 10, connections, be curious, not judgmental. And it basically synthesized down, and they did an exercise that had them list 2 items, I think it was, for true today and true in 10 years, things that they would like to see going forward that may not be the fact today, but they would like to see in 10 years. And then that was synthesized further into those 7 strategic planning goals, but there were details associated with them that would give the conversation with the directors a little bit more to follow. For example, in transportation mobility, it was Annapolis is kept safely in motion by a comprehensive integrated system of pedestrian, bike, and vehicular traffic, complemented by an efficient, robust transit system. The city demonstrates its commitment to best pedestrian safety by installing new and widening existing sidewalks, which makes for the city more viable and creates connections between neighborhoods, and so on throughout the 7. So we're hoping that when we get together with directors, not only do we get into the detail of that, but I think one of the real keys, not only with the council getting together and the directors getting together, is keeping in mind we've been through COVID, and COVID has really created a lot of separation, and it doesn't lend to what I think is a cohesive operations, and certainly what I've seen before when I was here. And so the next step will be to bring the leadership team and the council closer together, better trust, better communication, collaboration, and then the action items to implement what the policymakers are elected to do.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, is that she did meet with the staff before us, correct? And or not?
Facilitator.
What's that?
That was a different facilitator.
Okay, yeah.
Really, the one that we used before Ellie was more oriented towards team building regardless of discipline. I wanted to get somebody in, and I had a little mentoring from your colleague from Ward 8 on making sure we had someone associated with ICMA and the whole strategic planning process. And I think that worked well.
Yeah.
The next key will be deciding which one will lead both. And I haven't come to a conclusion. At first, I was thinking the person we had with the leadership team, but I'm not sure now.
Oh, so that's an important point, though, because they knew it was, they were trying to re-engage really the city council with the department heads and, they say things in a different way, but by the end of the day, you realize that we were on the same page. I didn't know that. That's good. That it was an independent discussion with the city staff versus the city council.
Yeah, really what I saw with the city staff is it was from an organizational standpoint, regardless of the real details of what we're implementing, it needed a little work on being a little bit more cohesive, a little less siloed.
Right.
And we worked a lot on that and positive and forward thinking, not negative and steeped in whatever had just transpired the last couple of years. With the ICMA person, I think their familiarity and background and governing specifically, which the person who did the leadership team was more, came from academia, more University of Maryland for 30 years, was more towards organizational development. So we're not there. I'm not sure. Tricia and I are going to get together and hash that one out, because I was thinking all along it was going to be the person who was there first, but I don't know, maybe Julia Novak would be better, because we're going to now synthesize this into how we're going to apply it, and she may have better strengths in that. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Ross and Ellie for that update. And I think we all probably look forward to the next steps and seeing something productive come out of it for the long term for the benefit of the city. So thanks, appreciate it. Next, Jim, Audit Committee.
Thank you. Last audit committee meeting was November. The finance director presented the results of the 2021 audit report. There was one finding that was noted by the auditors with regards to the release of COVID assistance funds through the transportation department, and it was adjusted. It was an isolated incident, and the auditors accepted management's response to it. So it was, like I said, an isolated incident. Audit committee did not meet in December and is meeting next week.
Yeah, Jim,
So
how often does the Audit Committee typically meet?
right now, the audit committee is meeting monthly. The chair of the audit committee is sitting to my left. So
Oh, wait, we all have different screens. for
Yeah.
us.
Alderman Arnett is the chair of the audit committee. The audit committee, as you know, is comprised of 7 individuals. There are 3 members of the council, 1 fact designee, and 3 citizen representatives. A citizen representative resigned just prior to the November meeting, but a new citizen member has come forward as recommended by Alderwoman Tierney. I have tried. I've recommended 2 members of the audit committee, and they've started and left. One ended up getting hired by the city, and the other just didn't feel like her place was there. But the audit committee still seeks citizen members from within the general public.
Jim, you've served on the Audit Committee as a fact representative for how long?
A little over 4 years now.
Okay, I think you've expressed to me anyway, if not to the group, a desire to step down from that role.
Yes, if another designee to the audit committee could be identified, I would be grateful. I do want to rededicate my efforts to participation in the FAC. I know that there are opportunities for subcommittees within the FAC that I had to turn down just due to my commitment on the audit committee.
So let me not put anybody on the spot, but are there any members of the FAC who would be willing at least today to step up and take Jim's place on as the FAC's representative on the audit committee? Jim, what is the time commitment?
Similar in a way to the fact there are monthly meetings. Meetings run, between 45 minutes to an hour. I typically do preparation equal to the meeting time in advance, whether it be reading minutes, reading reports. There was over the past 4 years, there have been a couple opportunities. Let's see, I did. We took on we took on one external engagement, and I assisted the finance director and the procurement director in the scoring of proposals we did for an RFP for an external audit or for an external cash handling procedures was the initial one. And then we did select a new audit firm a little over a year ago. And I assisted the finance director in reviewing the RFP and reviewing the responses and scoring the responses. So I guess just due to my desire to serve, I stepped up on various audit committee activities just because there were no citizen members at the time. But so it's something where if it plays to your strengths, it would behoove the city in general, and your talents will be appreciated as an outsider. Just to participate in the process that's necessary for the audit committee to function effectively. Would that sum it up accurately, Ross?
Very accurately, and your services have been very much appreciated. In fact, I always think of you as the leader of the audit committee, but I understand the desire to step away and get somebody else to fill in for a while. So we look forward to someone from the FAC taking your place.
Oh,
Thanks.
I
thank
had a
you.
question real quick.
Yeah.
I spent my career as an auditor, but I was wondering, are most of these audits more financial, or are they performance program type audits that you would be reviewing?
The city has external accountants that do the financial audit and the single audit for the annual comprehensive financial report, ACFR. Since the city does not have the services of an internal audit department, there's an earmark for services as needed for the audit committee to determine if additional internal audit type activities are required. In the past 4 years, we've only engaged in that once. The city management was in the process of implementing operational performance measures in conjunction with quarterly budget reviews. That was led by the prior city manager, and now I think that's been refocused as a result of the retreat that occurred earlier late last year. So that the primary focus of the audit committee, and Alderman Arnett will concur with me, is to review the work of the external auditors, serve in an oversight capacity to those members of the council who are less versed in financial and auditing matters.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Patrick.
Yeah.
So as this little discussion whetted anybody's appetite to raise your hand, say, yeah, I'd like to, or I'm willing to be the FAC designated representative to audit committee.
All right, I'll continue to serve. If someone wants to discuss in greater detail, I'm happy to discuss in greater detail outside the scope of this meeting. I don't want to bog down the meeting with that type of dialogue. So
Okay.
I will continue to serve.
All right, thank you, Jim. But if anybody else, upon reflection, has an interest in serving or thinking about some want more information, just reach out to me and we'll continue the dialogue. But Jim, thanks, and certainly thank you very much for your service.
Thank you very much.
Unfinished business, spending affordability subcommittee. Bob, anything to report on that briefly?
Yes, thank you, Fred. On Tuesday, the chairman, Fred Sussman, and I met with City Manager Mike Malinoff, and we read him in on our work to date on the spending affordability project that has been ongoing. We also shared with the city manager the report that the subcommittee had presented to the Financial Advisory Commission back in February 2020, which was an analysis of how the county conducts its spending affordability function, as well as the state of Maryland, and the possibilities that may exist in the form of synergies between the city and the county if the city were to adopt a spending affordability function, and also the possibility of how the city could model off the county's effort and share, some of the resources from which data is gathered for recommendations to be made by a spending affordability function if one were adopted in the city. So at this point, we're waiting to hear back from the city manager after he has an opportunity to read that report and receive guidance from Mike as to how he feel it would be best that the subcommittee moves forward on this in terms of next steps. All along, this effort has been in collaboration with the administration and those members of the city council that have participated in these meetings. There seems to be a strong feeling that this would be a very helpful, beneficial type of activity to be involved in. So at this point, as soon as we hear back from the city manager, Mike Malinoff, with some guidance, at that point, Ed Meehan and I, as the subcommittee members, will, he'll pick up on that guidance and move forward. So that's the report.
Thank you very much, Bob. Any questions of Bob? Mike?
Yeah, Bob, you also mentioned the Fells Institute, which came, I guess, University of Pennsylvania. I did a little research on it, talked a little bit with Jody and Tricia about it, and reached out to one of my colleagues. So we're doing some due diligence on that as well. And Bob can explain it because it was his idea, but it did have some interest for us because it could serve as informational. We wanted to make sure and get an idea of how much staff supporting component that would entail, not to beat a dead horse, but finance is trying to get enough people to do its day work. So, but it did seem interesting and could be helpful.
Yes, the Fells Institute, that is something that both the chairman and I began our discussions back in the summer on, and that's a longer term project that would dovetail with the spending affordability function. And we may have briefly outlined that with the fact in the last meeting that we had. Fred, I would defer to you if you have any other further comments on that.
The only thing, I'm not prepared to discuss it in any great detail today, but just what it is an institute out of the Wharton School of Finance of the University of Pennsylvania that engages in graduate student type projects looking based on proposals they're submitted by local governments and other entities looking for assistance in developing long-term sustainability plans, financial sustainability and otherwise. And it looks like it might be something that might be beneficial to the city, but we're still evaluating it. And when there's more information, if there's more information, we'll certainly bring it to the FAC for discussion and possible endorsement. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, Bob, thanks a lot for the report. Next, we'll go down to collective bargaining wrap-up. And we deferred this from the last meeting. And this item emanates from a request by Ed Meehan and certainly endorsed by other FAC members to see if the administration, council, whoever can provide us a little bit of information about, the response to the FAC's letter regarding the results of the collective bargaining process. So I think staff has talked about this and is prepared to discuss it with us. So let me turn it over to whoever, who's going to take the lead on this. Jody? Okay, go ahead, Jody. Thank you.
So I'll start by saying, as a result of the last meeting, we got together and talked about a response to your report, in total, all the points, and come today prepared to talk about, our feedback on the comments and recommendation, with some focus on the collective bargaining. So and I thought we could start with the collective bargaining because I know some of the Office of Law representatives here today have to drop off quickly. So if we want to start by talking about the collective bargaining issues that you brought up in the letter, and then if you want to get more feedback on the rest of your report and the financial related recommendations, we can either talk about it today, or if we run out of time, I could put this together in a memo to the FAC and relay our comments to you that way. So have Tricia step up and talk about the collective bargaining issues, and then possibly Office of Law if needed.
First and foremost, we would love to be finished with collective bargaining in time to present that to the budget. I just want to be realistic about some of the constraints and some of the impacts for us as well. This is not at all to put aside, the good economic health and the conclusion. That is all complete information everybody would love to have going into a budget process. Some of the realities for us, and I have talked to colleagues in other jurisdictions as well, are just how do we want to engage in interactive bargaining with our four unions. Some of the impacts that other jurisdictions have gotten into is binding arbitration period. And when you force a calendar, you have to have a mechanism for when you've reached an impasse or when you don't have a conclusion. And when there's an independent arbiter that's assigned, that's an expensive undertaking. If you have, and because you have to pay for the arbitration oversight, you also have to abide by, if you have binding arbitration, by their decision. My colleague in the county told me that what they experience is their public safety unions push for and got binding arbitration. So when an arbitrator comes in, they look at what your financials are right then, and whether say the union asks for the moon, if you can afford the moon in that instance with that bargaining unit, then they will win. And so it's the ability to pay. It's not even about what money you wanted to set aside, say for council projects or for other initiatives that were part of the goals and objectives of the city. So I just want to put that out there as some elements of how this works. Clearly, we want to make sure going in that we're not going in with more money than we have the ability to pay. And so you need some level of transparency. We do need to consider ways to get conclusion faster. I totally agree with that. I think that's a very reasonable expectation, and something that administratively we can attempt to build stronger efforts in. We set our calendar at the beginning of bargaining and try to stick to that. But when you have, you clearly have strategies that occur on the part of unions, which is to make sure they know how many dollars you have and keep pushing and pushing until you get to settlement and get to conclusion. So they get that's just the way it is. So they get the greatest benefit out of the experience. It's a conundrum, I think. I think we need to, as a city, consider objectively where we want our money to go and how. And then we also need to consider what elements are part of the collective bargaining process that are involving economics, because non-economics aren't really the challenge here. I know from your perspective, it's really the economic impact of all of the elements of the collective bargaining agreement. We also have the balance of trying to attract qualified people to work for the city and perform in jobs that include union positions. And so there are other elements that we would like to engage in ahead of time that have to do with pay structure and career ladders and other kinds of ways that are growth built for employees, so that that's also an element of attraction. But you have to really have a good benefits and salary package in order to attract people to the city. We are competing with major counties surrounding us. We are competing in terms of public safety, because clearly that's not a corporate or a private sector attraction there. But we also have public services that aren't otherwise offered by the private sector that are part of that too. So we participate in a local government personnel association where we provide and receive salary data so that we can also look at our competitiveness with surrounding jurisdictions and use that information during the collective bargaining process. I don't know if Carrie would like to add any more to that.
Well, this is Mike Lyles. And,
sorry, Mike.
No, I'm here. I asked Carrie to be present in case I had to leave. I reviewed the letter from the commission here, and it appears that the issue relating to collective bargaining has to do with timing, and that's not necessarily something that needs more explication beyond what Trish just said. We are here if you have additional questions, but for us on the legal side, the numbers related to the economics of the collective bargaining agreements were pretty much finalized by the end of April, which means that the budget and the council had 60 days of information related to the collective bargaining agreement to adjust, amend, revise the budget. So I'm not really seeing where the issue is. I do think the Financial Advisory Commission has a good idea with respect to negotiating prospectively, negotiating this year, and then the numbers, attached to the budget in the following year. That's something that we've talked about as a possible change. The other thing that we saw on the legal side with respect to negotiations was you can move the time up, as Trish, I think, kind of talked about very well here. You can move the time to whatever you want to move it to, but until the mayor's budget goes in, the transparency of the union seeing how much money we have and what we're trying to do with it doesn't even come into play in their minds until then. We started the collective bargaining in October, which was earlier than previous years, but we're negotiating with 4 unions, and we brought in outside attorneys by request. And that's, you're talking about 12, 15 people, including the city manager's team. And all of those dates to have face-to-face or Zoom meetings have to match up between October and say February, March, when the mayor's budget comes out. So I would, just from my experience with this, and this was my first experience with this, we had a hard time getting dates that everybody could meet. And so that was part of a delay in my mind, so that we didn't really start in October like we were supposed to. We started probably closer to November. And then once you're in November, it's holidays, and then, you know, people are on break. And so there was some delay there. So I think that negotiations really effectively started sometime in early January. You know, we really had a couple of meetings in November, a couple of meetings in December, and we were off and running in January. Everybody could meet, and we were meeting 2 and 3 days a week, of course, internally, and then, of course, with the representatives. So not sure what you do with that other than to change the structure of the negotiation and apply the results to a future budget. But I would say ultimately, with respect to the main point, is whether or not the negotiated numbers and the negotiated non-economic terms are before the council. I would say they are. The mayor's budget comes to the council in March. We were completed with 99% of the CBA by April 27th, and the documents were signed on June 30. So from April 27 to June 30, when the budget has to be approved, the council has 2 months and a couple of days to review those numbers and to have any impacts reflected in the budget, or for us to go back based on council authority to renegotiate a number. And we were constantly updating the council throughout this process, even as we were going through the negotiation period. After the budget was submitted, council was being updated. So, you know, I'm willing to take questions on the process, but that's kind of the clear thing that stood out to me in the FAC's letter.
Yes, Michael, and Tricia, thanks, you know, for your review here of our letter that we submitted. Michael, my question to you, I just want a clarification. The unions did not ratify an agreement in April, is that correct? The city became aware of the negotiating positions, the city council became aware of the negotiating positions, but there was not a ratification of agreements in the month of April, is that correct?
Well, negotiations don't really work like that. Yes, the unions have to ratify it with a vote, but the union structure allows their representatives to basically give us a tentative yes or no. And then there
On each item as we go through.
on each item as we go through.
Yeah.
And so when we get to, so when I talked about April 27th, I'm looking at a document where we have met with representatives. We all basically have a handshake. And then there's some technical aspects with them having to ratify and then sign. But that ratification took place somewhere between April 27th and the end of May. And then, you know, the document was actually signed June 30 for all the unions. So we are pretty, and we do this, we pretty much allow that the representatives coming to us saying they're meeting and informing their people, we trust that they're telling us that, you know, they've got the authority to come to terms that we have addressed in the handshake or tentative agreement as of the last meeting, late April. They also have to trust that we have been informing our leadership, our council, and that we're pretty much on solid ground that the terms that we've expressed in this handshake will probably survive to the end of the budget. They understand, and we continue to inform and advise that we still have to have a council vote on the whole budget, and things could change. And we're aware of that, but there is some level of trust between the organizations and the leadership negotiation teams as we go through this process.
Okay, Michael, so given that the city council has been informed and communicated with by the administration during the negotiating process to such a point where in April, there seems to be a tentative understanding that everybody seems to be on the same page, including the city council with the administration. However, where does the fact fit in at that point? Because certainly we haven't been engaged at any point as the city council has, and yet our charter, our role and responsibility is to provide advice and guidance to the city council and the administration. And yet, the fact has not been communicated with, at least to the extent that we have felt comfortable and being able to render any type of advice or guidance during that 60-day period between April and the end of June, when the budget needs to be ratified, as pertains to what are the tentative agreed upon points of that come out of the union negotiations, and whether those tentative agreements are financially, viable, if you will, for the city going forward, if they were to go ahead and sign on to that. And again, part of our concern, as we've expressed in the past, is that even though we ourselves feel that we have not been engaged as the intent was when we were formed back a number of years ago, but we also sense that even among some of the city council members, they feel that they themselves are somewhat not fully equipped with all the appropriate information that they need to be able to engage and perhaps at some point raise some concerns about what has been tentatively agreed to. And if those concerns were raised, does that 60-day period between April and the end of June provide enough time to go back to the table and work through some of these issues so that a budget that's approved at the appropriate time, according to the city's, charter and code, is a sound financial document that, covers all, the expected expenditures that would be anticipated, particularly when it comes to, the labor costs, which make up a sizable portion of the city's budget. I say that, and then the other point, which we did raise in our letter, Michael, as you pointed out, and Tricia, as you pointed out, is that, we indicated if we get to the point where, we're at where we have to approve a budget and there's still some loose ends, that perhaps, the understanding could be that what's ever agreed to could take effect in the subsequent budget year, fiscal year, rather than in the one that, is about ready to be voted on. So anyhow, those are just some thoughts to share, some concerns to share. Would welcome your responses. Thank you, Michael and Tricia.
I think it is important to address that latter part, Bob, because part of good faith bargaining is what you're engaging in is what you are going to finish with in a fair and open collective bargaining process. To say that we have to delay it to the next year, we would have to take that stance very early on. And actually, I would feel more comfortable if we got some assistance on making sure we're not violating any standing labor laws in pursuing that in that manner. I would prefer to get legal guidance on that from the professionals in that area, because that's just, I don't have experience with it. I'm just going to be open with you. I don't have experience with that.
Well,
that is fully understandable, Tricia. I understand that. And I don't want to get into the weeds on that particularly, but I think going back to the primary concern that we expressed is that the Financial Advisory Commission is put at a disadvantage in not being able to give sound advice to the city council and administration on what comes out of that negotiating process as it pertains to the financial, situation of the city when we are, charged with the responsibility to give advice
Yeah.
on that and during the
So there-
budgetary process.
So
And
there probably are ways to address that, Bob, which is earlier on when the city's preparing its economic stance. I don't want to speak for Jody or Mike here, but maybe that's an element of the involvement or the exposure of that, because what we try to do going into collective bargaining is assemble our financial data to be as transparent as possible. What's the financial standing of what's published information that goes into our decision making? And we share that very early on with the unions. Sometimes we get asked for way more detailed information. A request for information comes typically from our public safety units. We don't hire an attorney to help us with our ASME units because we are quite capable of handling them. But public safety is a much more involved and active. Those two unions are much more involved in the collective bargaining process in terms of their skill level and the talent that they have to support them. So that information, the detailed information that we provide to them, is also part of what they use to consider costing out their requests, as we do at the same time.
And I would add too that the code is the guide here.
Mhm.
And the code, as we have read and interpreted it, is really the imprimatur that it's the council's job to tell us how they want the FAC to be involved. The code does not indicate that there is a pre-informational session with the FAC or that the FAC has any involvement in the negotiations. The FAC is there to support, under the code, the council's deliberation. The council is the one being informed. At any time from the time we bring the material on what we're going to negotiate to the council to June 30, the council is well able to say, we don't have enough information, send this to the FAC, or bring the FAC in to the meetings to discuss certain issues. That's definitely within the purview of the council to do. And I just don't see that as a legal issue at this point. It's a programmatic, it's an organizational, it's a how you make decisions issue, but definitely not anything legal. I don't think it interrupts what we do on the negotiation side, bringing in the FAC in various stages that the council allows. But that's up to the council. It's not up to the leadership team. The code doesn't give us on the leadership team or the negotiation team, the city manager, any authority to move outside of the structure provided for negotiations. And so, I know the code indicates that FAC has to see the date of the information about the negotiation, but the code is not written clearly enough, in my view, to address your concerns. But the code can be modified, but the council is still within its power at any point to have anything that we bring to the council delivered right to the FAC. And that's not an instruction we received.
And just to add to that, Mike, not the code can be modified, but it still needs to comport with labor law. We can't fail to include that element in our assessment.
I agree, but none of what I just said and what Bob deals with and what he talked about in his question has anything to do with labor law.
Yeah,
it has to do with how we structure the government information going to the people that need the information. As long as that is clear in the code, we have a lot of authority to do labor negotiations as we want to do them. The only part where labor law is implicated is once the negotiations begin, are we doing it fair, open, transparently? And are we doing it in a way that we are not unevenly or unhandedly pushing a particular term or provision for the collective bargaining in a way that's unfair? And that's when you get into arbitration and impasse. But at no time from October to June was there an impasse, in my view.
Right.
Just the common thread of negotiation. They had a point, we had a point. They came back with a counter, we countered, right? That there was really a good, open and transparent negotiation all throughout. But the council, being fully informed, always has the opportunity to say, hey, we need to bring in the fact, we need to give them some information, but that wasn't an instruction we received.
Yeah, to the
well-
extent that we need to pay attention to the Open Meetings Act, when sharing information, because
See, this is the this is the thing. First of all, you don't put the cart before the horse.
right,
You come to the office of law and you tell us what you want to do. We will then research whether or not it is legal or sufficient under our current code to do various things.
yeah,
But you can't presuppose that something that's in your mind that we haven't heard doesn't comport with labor law. You got to tell us where you want to go, where you want us to go, and then we can provide the advice. And I think there is nothing that you said, there's nothing in the letter that on its face violates labor law, as long as there is deliberation, there's a council vote, and there's a change to the authority in the code. The code is our guide, and there's nothing about what you said or what you've intimated, if it's changed in the code, would be a problem for us in the labor negotiation.
Well, I have the code right here in terms of how we were established, and the code in our establishment is rather broad. I guess what you're seeking is more specificity in the code. Being as broad as it is, it would tend to, comport to more of our understanding of what our role should possibly be and was intended to be. Now, if there needs to be more clarification in the code, and then at that point, we would have to defer to the city council as to at what level they want to engage us. But nonetheless, this is something that we as a fact, we take our responsibility seriously. We give a full commitment to the work that we need to do, and that the city council and the administration would depend upon us for. And in this particular area, we have felt continually all along that we are not being adequately supplied with the appropriate information, nor sought for guidance even before you go into the negotiations as to what the facts input in an advisory capacity would be. Obviously, we're an advisory body, and our recommendations, can either be accepted or not accepted on behalf of the administration or the city council. But nonetheless, we do have a responsibility to render advice and guidance. This is an area that has been a continual concern to the fact since our inception, some 14 years ago, perhaps. At some point, we just need to find some resolution. I think that's why you have seen over the last several months from the fact and from its members, a desire to want to arrive at some resolution, a structure, and a process where we feel that we can perform our responsibilities as they were intended when we were formed.
And I agree, but the decision about that rests with the council. The code is clear, although broad, and it says there is established a financial advisory commission which may advise the mayor and aldermen, women on financial issues. These issues shall include, but not be limited to, the review of collective bargaining agreements prior to execution, and an annual report on the amount of public debt. So where that occurs prior to execution is totally within the council, but it's not in the code right now. So the decisions have to be ultimately made by the leadership of the city. The code, this particular provision, also has to be read in conjunction with how the labor negotiations must proceed. The chief negotiator is the city manager. And the negotiations proceed in accordance with the code, but as far as dates. But other than that, there's an open area that probably needs definition, clarifications, specificity. And at the point that leadership decides what those are, we can determine with legal opinions and research whether or not that is impacted by any kind of state, federal, county law, or even our current code with respect to whether or not it's legal or legally justifiable to do a thing. But right now, we're really dealing in broad generalities. Your general opinion, the fact needs to be involved. Okay, but when and where? And what do you need to see? And when do you need to see it? And who needs to give it to you? And when you get it, what do you do with it? And do you get it in full committee? Do you get it subcommittee? Does one person get it and talks to the council every week? Those things are not worked out. So we have a general opinion about the facts support to the council, but the code is very unspecific about how that proceeds. And would be up to you guys and the leadership to tell us how you want to go.
Mike,
Now that part of the code that you read, Michael, where it said the advisory commission, financial advisory commission may advise the mayor and the aldermen, alderwomen on financial issues. When the term mayor is referred to, is that term defined as the mayor being the head of the administration or the mayor serving as the chair of the city council?
I think it's referring to the group together, the mayor and the alderwomen, aldermen together.
As represented in the city council.
Yes. And now,
okay, so in other words,
I would have written it like that, but I didn't write it. But because this is confusing language. But the way you interpret a statute like this is, if it says mayor and alderwomen on financial issues, you can break it up, but that doesn't get you to, I think, a position that is different than what you have currently, right? So I read it as a group, that mayor and alderwomen, they have different titles, but they're probably talking about advising the total body, because the chief negotiator for negotiating purposes is not the mayor, right? It's the city manager. So when the mayor is brought up in this context, I read it as part of the council.
Okay.
Mike or Tricia, how long are the current collective bargaining agreements good for?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question, Fred. How long?
I'm sorry. The current collective bargaining agreements are good through when?
So we negotiated for 2 years, FY23 and FY24.
And I've got to jump off. I'm sorry, I've had deposition. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Harry,
appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. So when will the next set of negotiations begin? Approximately.
October of 23.
It's next year.
This year.
No, yeah, next year. Yeah, this year. I'm sorry.
Later this year. Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is, this is not something obviously that needs to be addressed today, but if the FAC is going to have any more meaningful role in the process that will begin in October or thereabouts of 2023, probably the next few months, some decisions are gonna have to be discussed and made as to what the if, what, when, how the FAC can participate in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd appreciate the opportunity for us to regroup around that. The administrative team that's part of negotiations, consider whether we need to consult our labor attorney in that regard. Really look at some structure to that. Our October beginning is really to set our rules of engagement and
Right.
any non-economic concerns. So we still have time.
Michael, are you still there?
Which Michael?
Oh, is there more than one Michael here?
Yeah, there's a Michael Malinoff and there was a Mike Lyles, but he had to go to a,
Right. I'm talking about Mike Malinoff.
yeah, Mike Malinoff's here.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Listen, as city manager and head of the city's negotiating team, whenever that happens, let me pose this to you. Do you think that you and the city's quote team can confab over the next month or two about what we talked about and you heard today, and see if you all can come up with or want to discuss with us a possible structure that would provide a more meaningful input for the FAC in this process? I am certainly not suggesting, nor do I want the FAC to be part of the bargaining team, so to speak. But I do think that, and I think Bob summarized it well, that if we have a responsibility to provide guidance, that it be done with appropriate information at a meaningful time and a meaningful way. So, can you see if you can hunch of that in the next month or two, Mike?
Sure, yeah, and as Tricia said, we need to consult with our labor attorney to get some parameters from that individual. And having been through over 30 years of these in 3 or 4 different jurisdictions, we have to be careful. Otherwise, it's such a fun process. I wouldn't mind turning the keys.
I understand. I don't think any of us want to compromise the cities.
That's okay.
So, anyway, thank you. I will continue to have this item on the agenda. It may be that next month there won't be anything to report, but at least by keeping it on the agenda, we'll stay focused on it.
Can I just say one thing, Fred?
Yes.
I just want to honor the fact that at the city, we've really had good relationships here. I mean, I've been in other jurisdictions, talked to my colleagues. We don't have the kind of contentious bargaining that some other jurisdictions really get embroiled in. Yes, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's really challenging, but honestly, based on our relationships with our union representatives and our, through our, even their representatives that they bring in, we've done pretty well here, in the balance. We've done, we've maintained good relationships. It's something that I strive to do all throughout the year in the interactions with the union representatives and addressing their concerns. And a lot of times you can measure that by the number of appeals and grievances of decisions that are made in implementing elements of a bargaining agreement. It's in what kind of issues even get brought to the table when you do sit down. So I just want to say, in support and recognition of both sides of that process, that we in the city do pretty well. I feel good about that.
But I'm glad to hear that. Often cities criticized by people who don't necessarily know and understand what's going on and the what's, the where's, the why fors.
Yeah.
What, where, why for?
Wherefore.
Wherefore.
And therefore.
So thank you for those comments, Tricia. And
yeah, I think that's important for people to know and understand, because you don't often get it, like you say, you don't often get a chance to know what effort and talent is brought to the table to make all that happen.
Any FAC members or anybody else all the people have any comments or questions? If not, yes, Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say in full transparency, I'm thinking of what is it? Einstein said that about insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Having experienced this issue,
That was Freud.
yeah, this comes up every budget cycle. So clearly there has to be something to address it. I've opened up the code and drafted legislation, and it's been a learning curve. And what triggered that is that there is a statement in the code that on the third Monday of March, we should know what that union agreement is. I mean, it's in the code, the third Monday of March. And legally, if that is not met, there has to be some consequences, and that would be impasse legislation. And I don't believe that the city management wants to go that route. So I've drafted legislation that is in the law office, and had sat down with Director Dickinson because the legislation is modeled basically on what we did last year, which I believe was somewhat successful. The question is, yes, I agree. We got a number, we got an impact on April 27th, but what was that? Was that the actual number, or was it an estimated number? What do we want that to be? That all has to be codified somehow. And I don't know what the law office is going to do with this legislation. I know that Assistant City Attorney Carrie Berger has looked at it. Jody and I sat down and also took the time to edit things that we don't do anymore. So my goal is basically to codify the budget process. So hopefully that will be a democratic process if it gets out of the law office. And when it comes to council, that is an opportune time to talk about where we want, where and what do we want the fact to be. I mean, right now we do have a date ideally in the budget process where we sit down together, and ideally we are looking at this together. But again, what is that number? How is it developed, and can we codify that? But it was clear from discussing this legislation attempt that that this third Monday of March is not a realistic ask. And I think that has to be addressed then in the code, because I look at the code as the future. I mean, what if we were all not here and you had a whole different administration or finance director, and they look at the code and it's going to come up again, third Monday of March, where's that number? And we got to fix it then. So wish me luck.
Right. Thank you very much, Alderwoman Tierney. Other comments, questions?
But I gotta hop off. Do you need anything more from me? Because you
No,
have
I
Tricia
No,
and
I
Joe.
don't think so.
Okay.
Don't need anything from the city manager? Nope. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you.
Hey, Fred, this is Ed Van. I don't know, can you hear me,
Yes, we can. Ed.
Fred?
Yes.
Oh, well, good. Sorry, I've been on the entire time, but there were a variety of technical problems. So I know the hour grows short, so just very, very briefly, since this was a topic of interest to me, just want to note that when I was asked to get on the fact, the central topic that was presented to me that we would focus on was collective bargaining agreements. And so I gather that the interpretation from the city attorney suggests that our role is not what I thought it would be. The code speaks in terms of review. It's clear that the system is not designed in a way so that that review is meaningful. And so I'm encouraged to hear that there's going to be an effort made to try to address that going forward. I think that would be great. And I guess the last thing I would say is my understanding, and I don't know if it's accurate, but my understanding is that given the nature of the process and the timing, that none of the recommendations that the FAC made in the letter we submitted were actually implemented. And if that's accurate, it just underscores the need to address the timing. That's all I wanted to observe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And yes, I've seen a little telephone icon with your name on it, so I assumed you were there on your phone. Okay, again, thanks for your comments, Ed. Anything else on this issue? Hearing none, let's move down to new business, the FACT 2022 annual report. Kim sent out the annual report a couple days ago, and I had hoped that we would have it sooner, but we got it when we have it. The annual report is in substantially the same format and generally content that we've done the past few years. Probably is a format prescribed by the city clerk's office. And I don't have any comments or questions about it. Does anybody else on the FACT have any comments or questions? Seeing no responses, I will entertain a motion to approve the FACT 2022 annual report. Anybody? Motion by Bob Burns, seconded by Patrick Bannon. Oh, Jim, do you have? No. Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye and raising the right hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Kim, if I may ask you to provide the annual report, sign my name to it, to the city clerk, so that it's done in a timely manner, I would greatly appreciate it. Kim, I see you have your hand raised. No, okay. Next item is FACT 2023 elections. At the last meeting, I mentioned that we would have elections today for chair and vice chair. I asked anybody who might be interested in stepping into the role of the chair or vice chair to let me know prior to the meeting. I haven't heard anything from anybody. I expressed a willingness to continue to serve as chair if nobody else wanted it. And I think Bob Burden, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you indicated a willingness to continue as vice chair. Is that correct, Bob?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. Mhm.
Okay. Let me give everybody one last opportunity. If anybody wish to serve as chair or vice chair for 2023, other than me and Bob. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to elect me as chair and Bob as Burden as vice chair for 2023.
This is Frank Brown. I so move that Bob and Fred continue in their current positions as chair and vice chair.
Okay, thank you for the confidence, Frank. Second by Jim Cardillo.
I second. Thank you.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye or raising your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain on mine. I vote for Bob.
And I vote for Fred. And I
And
abstain
Bob
on mine.
abstained for his own. So that having been said, unanimous, subject to the two abstentions. And anything else, that's the end of the agenda. Next meeting, February 9th at 8 a.m. I think Madeline told me at the beginning of the meeting that she probably will not be here. She'll be on vacation. So we'll have somebody else managing the video of the meeting. Anything for the good of the order? Any last comments, questions? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn. Bob Burden moved to adjourn.
Second.
Whoa, I'll give Perry Hepworth a second on this one. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?